Hi, my name is Jeff Rhodes, and this is another video based on my book, Creating Business Applications with Microsoft 365. So you can check it out on Amazon or other retailers. We can scroll down, see how it's doing today. Number 5 in SharePoint Guide, so that's pretty good. So come in and pick up a copy and give me a rating if you can. Appreciate that. So let's jump over this real-world application I wanted to do. It turns out that our health insurance company, I'd been tracking my blood pressure because I've been on high blood pressure medicine for a long time, and it had its own portal for keeping track of blood pressure numbers, and they got rid of it at the end of December. So I thought, hey, why don't I write one to track my own blood pressure in Power Apps and so forth. So I thought we'd go ahead and write it. And like many things, the base one is really simple, and it gets a little more complicated once you get a nice user interface and some Power BI reporting. So it will take us a little while to get through the whole thing, but even if it takes us half an hour, that's pretty quick to design, write, and deploy an application. So I did already create the SharePoint list, but there are a couple little nuances on there. So let's take a second and look at that. So I've called it blood pressure, and I did just the new list. So the first thing that just always is annoy me, but it always puts a title column. I'll typically rename it, and if I need a single line of text, I'll just rename it to what I need. But in this case, I just didn't need one, so I just called it not used, and I'll show you in a minute how you get rid of it. So if you are working in SharePoint, it just doesn't show up. So I have a blood pressure date, and I didn't want to use the created date or this one or any of the others because I wanted to give the functionality that maybe I did it this morning, but I don't remember till this afternoon, and I want to be able to set the date and time. So I wanted to have a separate one. And then, as you might know, on blood pressure, there's a systolic, which is the high number, and a diastolic, which is the low number. And then I also wanted a notes, multiple lines of text. And one thing I always like to do, unless I need formatting, I'll come in here and select plain text. It just avoids a step when you get to Power BI. You don't have to do some gyrations to get your hands on the plain text or worry about the HTML formatting and so forth. So the other one to point out is what you want to do if you want to get rid of that column is you first have to turn on content types and advanced settings. And then what you have to do, that makes this content type editable. And then what you want to do is you click on the column you don't want, and then you make it hidden here. And the other thing you can do is edit the column order, and that's really only if you have a form inside of SharePoint, but I went ahead and did it because technically you'd want the date. And then even though you'll see in our app, we'll probably put the date at the bottom since we don't normally set it. But anyway, you can set the order here. And then what you normally want to do is turn that content type back off, but we're not going to use SharePoint directly, except I'll just look if it works. So let's jump over to Power Apps. And so as you see me do many times, we're going to come up and say create. We're going to create a blank app. We want a Canvas app. And normally I'll go with tablet, but in this case, a specific use case that I want is I want to be able to do it on my phone. So if I'm in Sam's Club or Costco or somewhere and they've got a blood pressure thing, I want to be able to take my blood pressure, pull up my phone, and log what it is. So I'm going to do it in the phone format. And we don't really have that much in our interface anyway, so we don't need a whole lot of real estate. So I'll just say set blood pressure. The other thing is I'm not looking to edit any of the values, so I'm just looking entry only. And that's one reason I normally like to build my own interface anyway, but it's one reason not to use the default one. So we're in Power Apps. Make that a little bit bigger. And first thing we want to do is connect to our, I want to add data, sorry. Now I want to type in SharePoint. And I'm going to connect to our data. So it's in my samples and my blood pressure. And now we just want to build it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the absolute simplest version first, and then we'll make it a little more complex. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we'll just, like I said, build the simple version. So I'm going to insert a label. As you've seen before, I usually like to show off just a little bit. So I make this, I think it's 320 or 640 is actually the width, so I don't have to drag it over. I like to make it centered. I'll make the fill color kind of blue, and then make the text color white. And that's a pretty good size. So I'll put my name in there. So I'll say user dot full name, so it knows who I am. And again, because I kind of like to play around, doesn't take long, I'll just go to media, image, put something really small in here, something like that, and I'll again just say user image, so it puts my picture in there. There we go. And then I need to put what we want to do. And again, I'll just make this like 100. Maybe that's not quite enough, but we'll just call it systolic. Make sure I always get those confused. Let me double check I got the right ones here. Yeah, systolic is the first one. And I'm going to say, put an asterisk here and, to say that it's required. All right, so I'll better make that like 150. Let's try that. There we go. And I'm going to make these a little bit smaller because I need a little more real estate when we get in there. So I'll just do it like 14 instead. So then I don't need the width so much. Let's make this like 120. Here we go. And for my simple interface, I'm just going to have a text input. I'll make this really small, so I'm going to put this like 50, maybe 70. There we go. Let's get again, we'll do this all like 14. There we go. And we're going to get a little more elaborate later, but I'm going to put this 120 for now. And I want to make sure I rename this, so I'll just call it systolic box. Like that. So let's copy these. And call this diastolic. And it's required. I'll put the required logic a little bit later when I build out the interface a little bit more, but this will be the diastolic box, and its default will be 80. So 120 over 80 is kind of like the, oh, and then both of these I should make their value numbers so that you can't type in that. And then the next thing we want is our date. And I'll just call it blood pressure date. And I'll make that wider, so we'll do it something like 200. Not quite. 240. There we go. And one of the problems, we can put a date picker in here. Like that. But it doesn't do the time. You know, we can make it display the time, but it doesn't notice the default, which we can leave as today, which is actually what we want. And I'll just set this, I don't actually see the font. Oh yeah, there we go. Just make that 14. Maybe I'll make that a little bigger, 18 in this case. And so I really want it to, because it can be important if it's what part of the day it is, you know, so we don't just want the date. So I'm going to call it blood pressure date. So we want the time as well. So we have to, unfortunately there's not a time picker, and you can't make this date picker turn into a time picker either. So that's kind of a hassle. So we'll just do a text input for now. So again, I'll make it 14. I'm going to make this blood pressure time, like that. And what I'm going to do is there's a nice text function, and I'm going to say now, which is the current date and time, and we can say date time format, and we want short time, like that. Notice how it gives us like 5:50 p.m. So let's match this. So this is, let's make it 365, just so it's a round number there. And notice it's at 2:45, so I'll do the same thing here. And 365, like that. There we go. And I'll put blood pressure time, like that. Now I'm going to need some logic, but I'll do that in a minute to make sure that if they enter that they don't put an invalid date. That's one of the complexities when we get on there. But we'll deal with that. And I didn't line this up very well. There we go. And then I need a note. So let's make one more copy of this. And that's not going to be required, so I'll just say notes. Let me make this a little smaller, so do it 220 or something. There we go, and I'll copy this box. I'll make it bigger. And it's going to be multi-line, like that, and we're not going to have any default text in there. And then I'm going to put in a label, which we're not going to do much with quite yet, but we'll get to that. And I'm going to say, please enter systolic and diastolic blood pressure, as well as the blood pressure date and time in XX.XX AM or XX PM format. There we go. I'm going to make that, get the color here, make it red. And I want to name this error label. So we'll do some logic. Actually, let's just do it now because we have all the parts that we need to do the logic for that. So let's just deal with that now. So we're going to want that to be visible is we need all the blank things to be non-blank. So if you think it's true when one of the things is blank, so we want to basically say is blank, and we can just start doing. So it's systolic box.text, or because if any of these are blank, There, and it went away. Okay, it's only or because we haven't put anything in there. So it is blank diastolic box dot text, or is blank. There's really no way we can do the blood pressure. Get rid of a date, but just in case, we'll say selected date, or is blank blood pressure time. So they got rid of the, oh, and I didn't rename the date, the notes yet, so we'll do that dot text. So we're going to come back to this one, or actually, yeah, we'll just do it now. Okay, so we get all that, and this I need to rename to notes box. So the other thing is I want to not only make sure that the time is, notice it hid that because none of them are blank right now, but I also need to make sure that it's in the right format. So I had to search, and I found in a Google article this, what we call a regular expression. So you can kind of see it's 1 through 12, 1 through with the space or colon, and then it has to be up through 60, and this is the 60 part, 0 through 5 and 0 through 9. So like can't be group 13 or something like that, either AM or PM. And you can even do a test string. So notice it matches, but if I say PM, it doesn't match. Or actually, I guess it does PM or AM, but if I just say nothing, it doesn't match. Or if I say AMM or any like that, it doesn't. Or if I say 13 here, it doesn't match. So this regular expression is what I need. So you just have to kind of search for that. Because there's some built-in ones. And if it matches, then it's okay. So I want to say or not, because I want to say is match. And notice what it tells you, the text, which is blood pressure time dot text. And then the next one is the format. So I just paste that in like that. Whoops. There we go. Again, I like the format, but it gives it a little better thing. So let's just play for a minute. So notice if I get rid of the AM, PM, see how this comes back. But if I also get rid of something in here, then it comes back. So that's working how we want. And now it's gone away. So actually for development, it can be kind of nice to get rid of that for a second so I can see where my real estate is. All right, so for our simplest one, we're almost ready. So I'm going to do a button. Where'd my button go? There it is. Put up here, so I'm going to kind of right justify that. And I'll call it the save button. And double click here and just say save or submit. Either one of those would work. And while we're at it, we can disable this if it's not ready to go. So we'll leave that display mode edit, but we can say if error, whoops, that to be a parentheses, error label dot visible. So if it's visible, we don't want it to be enabled. So we'll say display mode dot disabled. Else, which is if it's not visible, we'll leave it as edit. So notice like right now, you can't save it. And then let's go to the on select. Where'd it go? And since we didn't use our template, we're going to patch. See, and I don't need to, sometimes I'll do a check for that error visible, but since I know it's disabled, if not, so we want to patch, it's the data source, and then since it's a new record, I just say default and the data source. And then we just write the columns that we want. Okay, so again, it's systolic is systolic. Oh, and I need to make sure, since I said that was a number column, I want to make sure we convert it. Even though we know it has to be a number, we more formal and convert it. So we say systolic box.text. And then we do the same with diastolic. Diastolic box.text. And then now we've got a little bit of a problem with that, with the date time. So let's just cut that for a minute because I actually need to do something else there. So I'm going to want to make a global variable. So I'm going to call it var blood pressure date time. And what I'm going to use, one of the functions in here is date value. Right there, that's why I put this up there. So notice it converts a date time string to a date time value, and that's what I want. Because I've got the date, and then I've got that separate field with the time in it. So that's what I want to do, but it's easier if I put that into a variable. Plus then I can test it. So I'm going to say date time value. And then I just need a big string that does it all. But I know our blood pressure date, I know selected date, but that's going to actually have a time on it as well. So what I need to do is go back to that same text thing. And I can say date time format, and I just want to get the short date. So that'll give me 2/3/2024, which is the day this is being done. Okay, and then I need to concatenate. So I just put a blank space in there with the ampersands. And then I'm going to just literally use the text because I've already made sure that text is in the right format. So I can say blood pressure time dot text. And let's see, I'm missing. Oh, right, because I need one more thing. There we go. And if I convert it now, easiest thing to do is for me to just set that so I can test it. So I'm just going to play, put this back as 80 and save. And it didn't do much. But when I come back into this, notice when I hover over that, see how it says it's a date time down here, and it's got the what it looks right. The date, and it put its own comma in there just as how it formats it itself. So that's good. So all I got to do is a semicolon, then put that patch back in, and I'm ready to go. But sometimes it can be a little funky. So what I'm going to do on that is I'm going to close this up, not try to write it yet. So I'm going to close the brackets and then put that in and format it. Just makes it a little cleaner. Sometimes it gets a little bit confused. So now I can put the comma in. Whoops, I didn't want to put attachments. I didn't want that. I want to press return. And now I can put blood pressure date and say var blood pressure date time, like that. And then I can say, whoops, it keeps wanting to put attachments in there. I can say notes is notes box dot text. So this will write it. Let's go ahead and, after we do that, we want to notify blood pressure saved successfully. We have an enum. We want it to turn green. Success And I want to go ahead and reset all the things. So we want the systolic box reset. Oh, that's because I didn't put a comma instead of semicolon. Diastolic box reset. Blood pressure date. Reset. Blood pressure time. Reset. Notes box. And again, I like to format those so it kind of looks good. Alright, so again, we're going to make this interface better, but let's test that and see if it works. So let's just try. I'm going to be wanting, when we get to the Power BI, I'm going to want to show what I do with bad values. So I'm going to say it's 138/90. We'll leave it as 5:05 p.m. and just say some notes here, like that. And I'm going to save. I got the blood pressure saved successfully, and it reset that to its default value. So let's go look. We can see it saved it to the right spot. So far so good. All right, so what don't we like? I mean, for my own personal use, it's probably fine, but what I don't really like is there's not a good interface for this, for the blood pressure and stuff. We like to have either up and down buttons, or they don't have that there, but we have like a slider bar. So we're going to try that. So we're going to just move this over a little bit. And it shows some kind of interesting things anyway. So I'm going to insert, and I'm just going to type in slider. And it's kind of huge. So this handle size we can make down to about 30. And we'll make this just about 300 to give us a little bit of space. Because I also like to have some text on either side. So I'm going to copy this, put it over here like that. Well, we're going to make it like 50 wide. And we're just going to put in there. Normally we want this to be the min, and we could type it in, but we want this to go the slider itself. So let me rename the slider first. So this will be rename. This is systolic slider, like that. And let's set it up while we're at it. So I'm going to say, since 120 is kind of the normal one, I'm going to go 80 either side. So I'm going to say the max is 200. And the min is 40, because 80 plus 40 is 120 is the idea. And then we'll get to this default in a minute. We're going to work with that. But going back to this guy, I can make its value, I can say it's systolic slider dot min. Notice how it puts the 40 in together. And what I want to do with this is actually align it right so it goes right up next to it. Let's copy that and put it on the far end, and let's make it align left. And we make this the max, like that. There we go. Now I played with when I was getting ready for this video, I played with the other side of this, trying to get these to tie together. And the best I came up with was doing some variables. So let's do that. And so we're going to want to set up our variables. So we want to initialize those on start. So rather than, and I'm just going to put that 120 and 80 on there. So we say set, and I'm just going to call it var systolic. I'm just going to call it 120 and set var diastolic 80. Format that, and I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need, when we reset the app, we're going to have to do that again. So I'm going to put that in while I'm thinking of it right there before there, because we can't really call the on start again inside the app. So I'm just going to reset that because we're going to need that. So anyway, so what do we do with that? Well, now what we do for the default, rather than it just being 50, we just use that var systolic. And what we do on this guy is we also set it to that var systolic. There we go. Oh, and we need to run on start to get those to set. Notice how it kind of put this in the middle. And then the other part we need to do is figure out how we make them when one changes, the other changes. And so that's why we set those defaults, because if we change that default, the other value will change. So if we change the variable. So this has an on change, which doesn't do anything, but what we're going to want to do is just set that variable. So var systolic is now systolic slider, because it didn't pick it up, dot value. And then if I go over here, it's got it. So if they type in, I need it to work as well. So I go to this one and say on change, and I'll also just set that variable. Oops, or systolic I want. But I want it to be our systolic box dot value. So as soon as they change it, it will, oh, and it's not dot value, it's dot text. And it'll probably give an error because it's not a number. So we'll just say value of that. There we go. Not sure why that's not showing up at this moment. So let's run the on start again. There we go. And let's play and see if we, yeah, so it doesn't do it until we let go of it. But notice as we move it, this 90, and then if I type this in and say 110, the minute I leave, it should move it. So looks like it's working fine. So all we got to do is just kind of copy these and update the variables. Line these up. That. So this one we want to, since the we want to range it across 80, and we don't want it to be 0. So let's go 60 on either side. So 80, so this will be 160, or 60, yeah, so 80, sorry, this will be 140, and this will be 20, like that. And we want to rename this, we'll say diastolic slider, that. And then the default, it can be var diastolic. And the rest of that should work, and we just need to change. We did never set the, oh, this default's going to be var diastolic. And on change, we're going to set that variable. Var diastolic, and it's going to be diastolic box dot text, and then we're going to put that inside of value. And then we need to check this on change, because I don't think we changed that yet. Yeah, we're going to change. It picked up when we renamed it, but it didn't pick up the variable name, so it need var diastolic. So let's test that again. So this one looks like it moves it. We change this to 55. It'll go over. Excellent. And we don't really, since we're reading these boxes in our save, we don't really need to mess with that. And we have our logic. So let's just run it again. And so let's again, well, we'll leave it. Let's do 110 over 73. Let's give it an old date so that we have some dates to deal with too. So we'll just say January 10th at 3 o'clock p.m. Nice day. Save it. Notice how it reset that, because that's why I reset the variables when I did it. So let's go a higher one. Let's go 140 over 90. Let's do some other date, 26. I won't bother with a new time. Hello world, like that. Let's do one more. Let's go back in this December. And again, I'm mainly concerned with too high ones. I'll just do one part too high. So we'll say 110 over 92 and not even put a thing. So, all right, let's go look in. If I reload, I should have a couple more of those. And notice I'm actually sorted this in SharePoint, so it's got the newest ones at the top. So, all right, so all we have to, couple other things. Oops. Go ahead and save that. And then I can publish it as well. Let's do might change the icon. Got one that was like tools. Oops. There we go. Then I may make it something a little more orange. And we can save and we can publish, but I'm not going to worry about it now. But that's how I get on my phone. So let's jump over to Power BI. We've been going for a while already, but we got the whole app written with a nice interface. So I've got a blank Power BI here, so I want to kind of a couple interesting things in here. So let's go in and set up the SharePoint online list. And while we're doing that, let's go back to so we can copy the URL. So I want to get just the URL that doesn't include the list name. Put that in. I like to use the 2.0 implementation. And it found it. Let's do the blood pressure. And I'm going to jump right into transform data, which came up on my other monitor. So let me move it over here. Oops. So a couple things. I'm just going to rename this. Let's call it date and time. And this came in. I figured out it was a number, but I know that's always going to be a whole number, so I'll just change that. Got some notes. I can just remove this column that's not used. And there's some other stuff too that we don't really care. So I just really want two custom columns. So I'm going to do first a conditional column. And I'm going to call this first one, just call it high reading. So I'm just going to say, okay, if systolic is greater than, we'll say, so we'll give them, if it's greater than 120, then it's going to be true. And I'll say also, else if diastolic is greater than 80, then true. Else, false. So that's a nice conditional column. See, I've got mostly true because I was going to test some of my edge cases. It didn't realize that's a true false, so I like to go ahead and just tell it it's a true false. Gives us nice little check boxes. Another thing you've seen me do in other videos, I typically want to have how many days it's been since from the current date. And that we can always filter, we'll see by date range as well, but might as well do this one. Have the days, the number of days too. So I'm just saying days since reading. And so we'll put this in date time from date time dot local now. It's kind of like the today function that we saw before, minus the date and time, like that. And it has a whole bunch of numbers, but we want to change that down to a whole number. That didn't exactly do what I expect. Let's go. Oh, that's because I think let's go back up. Oh, you know why that didn't work? Well, that's why we check. Because remember, I didn't actually, somehow I must be setting the date incorrectly. So let's go look back at SharePoint. Oh yeah, see, these all have today's date. So we made a mistake inside the Power App. Let's go see what we did. Yeah, so something's actually not right. We tried to do this correctly. So I'm going to cut this whole patch thing out again and see if we can figure out what went wrong. So let's change this to like January and save. Let's go back and look at this. Yeah, it looks like it has the right date. Maybe I just didn't do it right. So let's put all that back in because I'm setting the date to be this variable. All right, let's do another one. Maybe I just didn't run it right. So let's just leave that exactly how it is and let's save it. Now it did reset it to that time. Let's go back. Oops. And reload. Yeah, it's right in current date over and over. Reload it again. Yeah, this is the one we did. Oh no, there it went. Yeah, so something I did wrong. We'll have to look in the video. So let me just, so that our text works okay, let me just give some, I'll just change these dates real quick. Just so that we're not all doing the same date. And I'll just do 12 of 2023. I don't really care so much on the times for this case. And I'll do 01 15. There we go. And we'll exit. All right. So let's reload. There we go. Now we got better dates. And let's go look at our, I have to go all the way down to the bottom. Yeah, and as many as 62. Okay. Well, that's why we test that. So it did look like our code was okay, but maybe I didn't hit okay on the dates or something when I did it earlier. And I know we've been going for a while, but we're almost done. But let's go ahead and we can do a few kind of interesting things here inside our display. So I'm just going to rename this and we'll just call it blood pressure data. There we go. And you've seen me before. I usually like to start with the table. I will do that. I'm going to do the date and time. And it always wants to put that into and do it quarters and so forth, which I don't want. Then I'm going to click the systolic, and then the and then the systolic, I don't want to summarize it. And I'm going to do the diastolic. I don't want to summarize that either. And then I'm going to click, is it a high reading? And then I'm going to put the days since the reading, and then I'm going to put the notes in. Maybe I'll make that fit the whole width like that. And what I like to do with the column is I like it to conditionally format. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to format on the font color. So I'm going to do rules. And it really doesn't matter if we do sum or whatever. I'll just do average. And so we say, okay, if it's by number, if it's greater than 120, and for this one we need to put something, so I'm just going to put 500. Then we want it to be red, something like that. And then I'm going to say if it's greater than 0 and less than or equal to 120, then we're going to make it green. It's kind of hard to see down there, but you can see they turned green. So let's do the same thing for the diastolic. Again, rules. Use the average, and so this one's going to be 80. Make sure we say number, and I'll just say less than 200. And it's going to be, I should, if I were taking more time, I'd pick it to make sure it's the same red, but this is not exactly the same red. Oops. And I actually wanted it to be at another 1. So I want to add a new rule. It's greater than 0 and less than or equal to 80. Then it's going to be one of these greens. Alright, so that's working as well. So let's kind of set up the top part of it. So we want a card. Actually, I'm going to need 2 new measures. So we'll do the measures first, and then I'll do all my cards together. So I'm just going to call it average systolic. And there's an average function. And I just take that one. What's nice about the measure is that it adapts to whatever context. So you'll see if I do some sort of slicers, it will update itself. So let's do another new measure. And we'll call this one diastolic. Equals average diastolic. Alright, now let's do a card. And really first thing I want to do is just the count. So I'll just say number of readings. We'll put that something like that. The upper right. Now I'm going to copy that. Put this at the upper left, and we'll put the systolic first. There we go. And then we'll Copy it again. There we go. We'll put the diastolic in there. And watch for a minute, by the way. Well, actually, we'll wait till we get some slicers in there. So let's do some slicers. So one that I'm going to want is whether there's a high reading or not. Let's make these match. So notice if it's true, then you see how the average goes up. Or if I only take the ones that are false, well, now it's a smaller average. So that's kind of nice. So let's do two more sliders. So let's do, or slicers. Let's do just the date. Sure, we're trying to line that up. Let's see. Give it a little bit wider like that. Let's do one more. And we'll do the days. It's kind of similar, so we can do. There we go. Days since reading. So again, I can kind of play with it and it'll adjust everything. And then we left a little space in the middle for a line chart. I kind of played around a little bit, and this looks to be kind of the most useful for the blood pressure. And so what we can do here on the x-axis, we'll just put the date and time, and then we'll put the diastolic. Oops, I don't want the hierarchy, and then we'll put the diastolic and systolic. We'll make those average. It doesn't really matter. And then we'll rename. I don't like it to say average because it's not really averaging it because it's just one reading. And we'll rename. And then we really need the date labels to show better so that will turn those on. There we go. And then we can see if I can, I don't want the 0 zeros in there, so let's see. It's the values down here. There we go. And so you can kind of see what's going on over time as we did that. So, all right. Well, been a long video. I won't go to the trouble of publishing it and everything, but I think we've got everything in there we want. So I appreciate your time. Hopefully this is useful, and I will enjoy using my app that I wrote during this video and using it myself. So have a great day.